please. Al, it's a great pleasure to be here with Rahul Gandhi and with a not quiet audience. I think we've already discovered a lively audience. And there's a lot to discuss. I'll just keep a vague eye on the time, including the most recent election. But I'd like to start, if I may, with a higher altitude perspective of how we got here. Situation where Modi's still got a third term in spite of having had his wings clipped. How did India reach this situation, the country of pluralism, secularism, your family's great role? What happened in the last 15 years to bring this about?
I mean, I think, first of all, of course, Mr. Modi has a central role in it. But I don't think it's only Mr. Modi. And I also don't think that it started in 2014. The general dynamics, the architecture and the forces that eventually got Mr. Modi are older. They just combined well in 2014. And I think India has had this fight. Modern India has had it embedded in it, the fight for and against the Constitution. And that's really the heart of it. The idea that all Indians should be equal, all Indians should be valued and treated in the same way versus a hierarchy. And the idea that, there is a hierarchy in India, a caste hierarchy, and that should be defended at all costs. So this is the conflict, and it's not a new conflict. I mean, if you go back in Indian history, you can go back 1,000 years, 2,000 years, you'll see this conflict. And it's a philosophical battle, and then it has its political structures. So
your family, I mean, I know everybody here will know, but it bears repeating. Your father was Prime Minister, your grandmother, Indira Gandhi, was Prime Minister, your great-grandfather, Jawaharlal Nehru, was leader of the independence movement and the first Prime Minister of post-colonial India, the greatest and the longest-serving Prime Minister. And your great-great-grandfather, Motilal Nehru, was obviously co-founder of Congress and therefore of the independence movement. There's nobody better than you, and looking back at your family history and at the sort of dramatic saga of India post-independence and pre-independence, to sort of stand back and ask, well, were there moments where, because your party was so much the natural party of government, that it became complacent, that it wittingly or unwittingly helped pave the way for this extraordinary period of Hindutva, which we'll get onto in a moment, may be receding, may or may not be receding, but is the self-analysis Congress should do, even now, to figure out how we got here?
No, look, politics ebbs and flows, right? And it's a contest, it's a competition, and you go up and down in that competition. And that's just part of it. I think the way I view it, that this has given us and the India Alliance as a whole a lot of space to think about how we go forward. I think the politics in India has fundamentally changed. And so, from our perspective, what we see, and some people would agree and some people would disagree, but what we see is that there's a clash of visions. We don't agree with Mr. Modi's vision. We fight it. And for us, we are trying to now put in place the basic foundation, the basic building block of a new vision for the country. And the Congress party has periodically done this. It's not the Congress Party. I mean, if you look at the Congress Party and you compare it to other political parties, it has this ability to reinvent itself, right? So you look at the 70s, the Congress Party nationalizes the banks, and then it does a complete U-turn, in the 90s, and then is going with liberalization, with open economic architecture. So I think there's a design element in the Congress Party that has been put in place by Mahatma Gandhi, and it has certain qualities as a political organization which are very powerful. I mean, I was watching the elections, and there was a point in the elections when we sat down with our treasurer, and he was saying, look, the bank accounts are frozen. Now, how are you supposed to fight an election if your bank accounts are frozen? And so we were like, okay, we're done. That was the reaction, and we really didn't have an answer. But then the Congress Party fought an election with its bank accounts frozen, and has basically destroyed the idea of Modi, right? So it has, and you can see it because when you see the Prime Minister now in Parliament, and I come face to face with him, he's psychologically trapped, and he basically cannot come to terms. He cannot understand how this has happened, right? So it's, for me, sitting in the Congress Party and watching it is quite an amazing thing, because it's a political party, but then it's a whole set of ideas. And now looking back, I mean, I realized that the Congress Party fought the British Empire. And there's a reason the thing survived that. And it's in the basic architecture of the party. Now, sometimes the party goes away from that architecture. So I differentiate between the Congress idea, the Congress philosophy, value system, and the party organization. And they don't necessarily 100% overlap. But when they start coming close, then it starts to become very powerful.
Okay, let's get into the election. I mean, as you say, it was not fought on a level playing field. I think it's fair to observe with your frozen bank accounts what's happened to my profession. The media in India is quite dramatic. Restrictions. And of course, you had a prime minister who was expecting not just a hat trick, not just a third consecutive victory, but to lift his majority from what I think it was 303 he had in the last Lok Sabha out of 543, a clear majority, to 370 up to 400, a super majority. And in the event, gets 240. Now, with your bank accounts frozen and the media playing field not being level and all the rest, how do you explain this? Is this because you formed this India alliance and had essentially power sharing of who ran where? Is it because the fruits of growth really weren't trickling down to most Indians in what is objectively a very high growing economy? Or was it a more principled thing, backlash against Hindu nationalism? Was it all of these or something I haven't mentioned?
No, multiple things came together, right? So, for example, prior to the election, we kept stressing on the idea that the institutions have been captured. And whenever we'd go, India Alliance would go, we'd stress on this idea that, look, the institutions are captured and we don't have a fair playing field. The education system is captured by the RSS. The media system is captured. The investigative agencies are captured. And we keep saying this. And people were not quite getting it. And we would keep saying it again and again and again, and somehow they were just not getting it. And we couldn't understand why, because we were like, it's obvious to us, it's obvious to them, and something wasn't working. And then in one meeting, one of the people who works with us said, listen, try holding up the Constitution. And so I started holding up the Constitution. And everything we had said suddenly just exploded. So India realized in this election, and really, I mean, not to divide it so crudely, but poor India, disenfranchised India, oppressed India, that India, it understood that if the Constitution goes, the whole game is gone. And so that was the first sort of, I saw it, there was a shockwave, that when I would hold up the Constitution, it would go, like I could see the shockwave going, that people are like, oh yeah. And then people started coming to me, when you're in these meetings, you'll start hearing from the sides that, they'll bring a constitution, or they'll start saying it. So what was very interesting to me was poor people deeply understood that now this was a fight between those who are protecting the Constitution and those who want to destroy it. So that was one very strong element. There was also the caste census issue that became big. And that's a fundamental question in India. Share, what you say in Hindi, bhagidari, of the institutions, the structure, the power of the Indian state. So these things suddenly started to come together. And at some level, I was frankly blown away by the wisdom of India. Like I would sometimes sit there and say, this is quite amazing, right? There was like a wall that suddenly arrived and said, okay, we are not backing down now. And really, I don't think the BJP, in a fair election, they were nowhere near 240 seats. No way. I mean, I'd be surprised if they had a financial, huge financial advantage. They had locked our bank accounts for one, but huge war chest. The election commission was doing what they wanted. I mean, the entire campaign was structured so Mr. Modi could, do his thing across the country. States where they were weak were designed differently than states where they were strong. So I don't view it as a free election at all. I view it as a rather controlled election.
What's your confidence? But clearly your goal now is to win the next election. And it struck me there's one of two ways, maybe both, that this could come about. One is that Modi is like, he's no longer godlike, as you say. He's sort of dented. He's down. He's not out, but he's down. Psychologically quite harmed, expecting this affirmation of his being above ordinary political mortals and not getting it. And that might lead to splits, infighting within the BJP. No, he's got no obvious successor, right?
My analysis is different.
Okay.
My sense, halfway through the campaign, was that Modi didn't think he was getting anywhere near 300, 400 seats. And I think early on he realized that this thing's going wrong, right? And we were getting inputs from the regular sources, some of the intelligence agencies we were getting some of that information. It was pretty clear that they were in trouble. And so there was this internal thing going on in the Prime Minister that I could see. And psychologically, that how is this now happening? Because he's a person, as you know, he was in Gujarat many years, never faced political adversity, then Prime Minister of India, and suddenly this idea started to crack. And we knew when he said that, I speak directly to God, we knew that there had been that we had actually blown him apart, right? And that the psychology had gone. And so people think that, well, this was the Prime Minister sort of saying that, look, I'm special, I'm unique, and I talk to God. But that's not how we saw it. Internally, we saw it as a psychological collapse that, what's happened here? How is this thing not working? And it's not just the Prime Minister, it's deeper than that. So what has happened in India, and you'll see it, is that the coalition that brought Mr. Modi to power has collapsed. It's broken right down the middle, right? So you'll see in these elections that they will struggle. They will struggle, yeah. Because the basic idea that Mr. Modi is running a government for the people of India is gone. Now the idea has been replaced. 2-3 ideas have replaced it. Number one, that there is a huge nexus between the government and 2 or 3 really large businesses. 2, that the lower castes, particularly the OBCs and the Dalits, have been taken for a ride. And this is a very strong, right across the board. And I mean, we poll it, we can see it.
You promised during the campaign a caste census so that you could then update the share of public sector jobs. Well, you could expand the share of public sector jobs reserved for lower castes.
See, there's the elephant in the room, right? Is when we talk about capture of institutions, when we talk about businesses, when we talk about the media, the elephant in the room is that 90% of India, OBCs, Dalits, Adivasis, they don't play the game. They're not even in the game, right? And that's really the elephant in the room. So the caste census is a simple exercise. And actually, it's more than the caste census. Caste census is one of 3 ideas. It's a simple exercise to say, okay, we've been, we got independence in 1947. We've been going for a while now. Let's see how have the lower castes, backward castes, Dalits, how have they integrated into this system? What is it actually that they're participating in? And frankly, we've got the data. We've done our homework, we've got the data. And I can tell you, out of the top 200 businesses in India, right, there's almost no ownership of 90% of the population. I can tell you that in the highest courts of the country, there's almost no participation of 90% of India. I can tell you that in the media, national media, anchors, journalists, there is zero participation of lower caste, OBCs, Dalits, Adivasis, right? So, and the people know this. It's not that this is not known. The large mass of people understand this, and they look at India and they say, okay, where is our participation? And the idea of the caste census is simple. We've not taken any policy position. We're just saying, look, we want to understand, we want a snapshot to understand where we at. What is the participation level of lower caste, Dalits, OBCs, poor general castes, right? And that's really the caste census. Now, there are 2 other components, which we have also said, but have not really been put out that much. One is the idea of a socio-economic survey. So we want to not only understand how many Dalits there are, how many OBCs there are, but we want to understand what their social position looks like, what their financial position looks like, what their economic position looks like. And the third component, which I think is very important, is we also want to understand, we want to take a look at India's institutions. We want to look at the media, we want to look at healthcare, we want to look at education, the owners, the structures that deliver these services. And we want to get a sense of what is India's participation in these institutions. So these are an institutional survey, a socio-economic survey, and a census.
Is there any reason why you wouldn't expand that to include the role of Muslims in modern
They're
India?
included in that. It's
So
not just
included
Muslims.
in the OBC.
It's minorities.
Category,
No, it's
minorities,
everybody.
Muslims.
It's
Okay.
even if you look at the general caste, you will find that there is a huge divide between poor general castes and well-off general castes, right? And that's the same for minorities, it's the same for Adivasis, it's the same for OBCs, it's the same for Dalits.
I mean, the reason I pressed you on that is because older people in this audience, and maybe some of the younger ones, will remember in 1992 when VP Singh's government announced its expanding government reservation system to other backward classes, not just Dalits. That's when L.K. Advani, the BJP leader, launched his Rath Yatra on Ayodhya, which resulted in the vandalism, the destruction of the Babri Masjid. So there is this sort of chemical interaction between caste and Hindutva reacting against it, mostly upper caste-led Hindutva. So you confident of the politics of this? I mean, because this has a history, right?
Look, from our perspective, if we talk about a nation that is going to progress, and if we talk about India becoming a modern nation, we have to ask the question about participation of 90% of our population. We can't just ignore it, right? There's just no way we can ignore it. Because frankly, if we go down this path, it's not sustainable, right? So it's not a question of caste or religion or Hindutva or anything else. It's a question of fairness. I frankly, as a politician, I don't want to live in a country where 90% of the people do not have access to opportunity. I'm not interested. So that's my position. And of course, many people would disagree with it. Many people would say, and the BJP and the RSS do say, that look, don't ask this question. Let a small minority of people just take all the fruits of the country. Now that's the fight, right? I mean, Mr. Adani and Mr. Ambani are a small component of that. They are a huge component in the business world, but they're a small component if you look at the entire picture.
Mm-hmm. I want to keep an eye on the time because I want to leave at least 20 minutes for questions. So we've got a couple more from me, if I may. Let me play.
Can I just say one
Yes.
more thing? I'm of the view, and I think most people who are involved in this will agree with me, that this is now an unstoppable idea. So if somebody thinks that now they are going to stop 90% of India from asking these questions, from demanding a census, from asking the question about how much participation do they have in our institutional structure, I don't think it's going to work. I think that the pressure is way too powerful.
But assuming, and I'm sure you're right, that this survey does produce the kind of picture in detail that you've just outlined, what would be the policy implications? Would it be larger reservations for...
That would depend on what comes out of these studies, right? But if you ask me personally, I think seriously increasing the amount of money the government of India spends on education, seriously increasing the amount of money the government of India spends on healthcare, providing a basic minimum to our people. Look, I'll tell you something, I mean, that just blew my mind. There's the NEET exam in India. Have you heard of the NEET exam? Okay. So I started studying the thing, and I got some people to start looking into it in detail, right? And it's mind-blowing what's going on, right? Do you know the pass mark of the NEET? 22%. Okay? So now this is how it works. If you get 95, 97%, you can go into any medical college you want. Okay? If you don't get 95, if you're not right up there and you get 95, 90, 85, 80, and you don't have money, you're not getting into medical college. And if you get 20% to 40% to 50% and you got money, going straight in. That's not an education system I want. That's not an education system I think India should have. Right? So I don't think there should be an education system that is determined simply by whether you can pay 2 crores, 3 crores, 4 crores to get in. I think that's destructive to India. Now, it's the same with the healthcare system.
I mean, one of the great, for friends of India and Indians in India and overseas Indians, one of the great worries about India in the last few years has been the health of Indian secularism, the survivability of India's secularism, the belief, I think, that your family and the independence movement in general embodied, that India is strong because it's plural and diverse, has now been, at least partially, to some extent, greatly supplanted by the idea of a much more uniform Hindu majoritarian India. Now, you've talked recently about the store of love, and I think as a sort of rhetorical counterpoint to the implication that the BJP represents a store of hate. My question to you is, are you updating your idea of what secularism is to suit the times we're in, the challenge that you're facing? Because this is a very different challenge.
By the way, it's not a rhetorical idea.
Okay.
It's a practical idea. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's anything rhetorical about it. I walked from Kanyakumari to Kashmir, right? And halfway through that walk, I started asking myself a question. And I was in politics from 2004. And I started asking myself, why have I never used the word love as a politician? And nobody uses it, right? We use anger, we use hatred. Every day you can read it. Nobody uses love. And then I was like, well, let me try. It works. It works much better than hatred. And it works practically, right? So, and I can't stress to you how effective and how powerful it is. So it's not a rhetorical thing. Love and affection are values that everybody accepts. Everybody feels. You feel it for your family, you feel it for your country, you feel it for your friends. So why is it not in the political lexicon? Right? So I think it's not a question of redefining secularism. I think that there is a stream of politics in India represented by Mahatma Gandhi that starts with this question. And that was what his life was about. That we are not going to accept violence, hatred, anger as values. I used to, you're saying rhetorical. I was in politics from 2004 to when the yatra started. Nobody. If I used to meet them, they used to say, hello, Mr. Gandhi, how are you? Very nice to meet you. Lovely to meet you. Nobody ever said, I love you. Now, no, I'm serious. Now I walk out, I'm serious. I walk out to a restaurant and after the restaurant saying, we love you. Now,
Oh, God.
I mean, like, I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't understand why. Why is it like it's sort of some complex, right? That politicians have, that somehow they're not allowed to show affection for people, or they're not allowed to be affectionate. They're not allowed to be loving. And I discovered that I did it in my yatra, and it's changed my way of looking at my work completely. So I think it's a very powerful thing.
So let me think of questions while I am asking a final one, because I'm going to give you about 20 minutes worth of questions. I'm sure there are a lot of them.
I want to just touch one thing that you said, the idea of secularism.
Yeah.
See, India at its heart, right, is a union of languages, traditions, histories, religions, everything, right? And that's just the design of India. When you have lunch here, you get first course, salad, first course, second course. We don't get any of that. We get a thali with everything placed inside it. Right? And nobody is sitting there saying, okay, what's the first course? What's the second course? No, they're like, it's a jumble. And all the food has the same value. Right? Nobody says, what I'm going to do? I'm going to take the dal, I'm going to separate it from the rice, and I'm only going to eat the rice, I'm not going to eat the dal. Right? So this idea of mixing and merging, this is India. And in India, this is a very deep philosophical idea. When Indian people go to a temple, or when Sikh people or people from any religion in India go to their religious places, what they're doing is merging with the deity. Right? They're doing this. And that is the nature of India. You can't remove it. And the misunderstanding that the BJP and the RSS have is that they think that India is a whole bunch of separate things. It's not. So we don't need to redefine anything. It's already there.
I can't help, and this will be my last question, I can't help branding this the Rahul Gandhi Love Actually campaign.
You've got away we want.
This has got to. But put
it's
that,
a lot more fun.
Yeah, no, I'm feeling
you go
that.
in politics, you go and then you shout at that guy, and then that guy shouts back at you, then you abuse him, then he abuses you back. It's boring stuff. It's tiring,
So between now and...
Like, you'll be surprised. I mean, you will be surprised, but I don't actually hate Mr. Modi. I don't. Like, I get up in the morning and, okay, he's got a point of view, fine. I don't agree with his point of view, but I don't hate him. And in fact, in many moments, I empathize with him. Right? So it's not that I think that he's my enemy and now I hate him and he's got to be, no. He's got a different point of view, I got a different point of view. I have empathy and compassion for what he's doing. And I think that's a much better place to be. Instead of this thing that, him versus me. I don't think that's productive.
Just very briefly explain, and I know it's hard to do it briefly, and I accept your point that love actually thing isn't just rhetorical. I stand corrected. What's the practical route between here and your victory in 2029, 28, 29?
I mean, giving India and it's not just me, it's millions of people, young people, giving India a vision that gives them hope. That's it. And putting in front of the people of India a set of ideas that makes them believe in the future. Today, India, and not to be arrogant, but I have spent more time than most walking my country. India is struggling to imagine the future. You know, when you struggle to imagine a future, you start discussing the past, right? So what is Hindutva's or Mr. Modi's or RSS's proposal? The proposal is, let's not discuss the future. Let's talk about the past. And that's very dangerous for a country like India, the scale of India, and it's also boring.
It's boring. Okay, I don't know whether there are mics. Yeah, so, okay, first of all, the young lady, and then I'll go up there. There's the young lady here. Do we have microphones, or are people... Oh, sorry, you have to... Oh, all right, don't stay in place. You have to queue up. So I didn't realize the system.
Oh my God.
But yeah.
Okay,
yeah. So we need them to be efficient questions. So, oh my goodness, this is a movement. because of the volume of questions, please keep them as short and direct as you can. Yes, please.
I wanted to ask you to elaborate on your definition of secularism. Is it the absence of religion in the state, or the civil equality of religion within the state? And I specifically wanted you to apply this definition to the Uniform Civil Code, because that is a very important topic in India today. And how would, if Congress did achieve a majority in the parliament, how would Congress go about reforming and creating their own Uniform Civil Code if they do want one?
Look,
thank you.
The basic idea is respecting people's perspectives, okay? And believing that all Indian citizens have a unique and different perspective, and they should have a space to have that perspective. And that includes religion, it includes language, it includes the clothes you wear, it includes the food you eat, it includes everything, right? BJP is proposing a uniform civil code. We haven't seen it. We have no idea what they're talking about. So for us to comment on it doesn't make sense. When they pull it out, then we'll have a look and we'll comment on it.
But when you talk about, may I ask a follow-up?
But I think not.
Okay,
I'm sorry. I mean, because I'm sure there'll be variations.
You can ask me the follow-up afterwards.
Are we probably going to be even-handed? So yes.
Hello. Mr. Gandhi, you lead the Indy Alliance, which is seen by many as an alternative to the BJP-led NDA government. Looking at the 2024 Lok Sabha elections, your party was not able to agree on seat-sharing policies with your alliance partner, which was Mamata Banerjee's TMC. You also have alliance partners like the Hindutva-based Shiv Sena UBT. My question is, if elected, how will you effectively run a government with such a divided coalition that cannot seem to agree on anything except for the removal of Prime Minister Modi?
No, actually we agree on a lot. We agree that the Constitution of India should be defended. Most of us agree on the idea of the caste census. We agree that two business people, namely Mr. Adani and Mr. Ambani, shouldn't run every single business in India. So for you to say that we don't agree, I think is inaccurate. Second thing is that all coalitions are negotiations, right? So a certain amount of to and fro will always take place. That is perfectly natural. There's nothing wrong with it. And we have run governments again and again which have been successful using coalitions. So we're pretty confident that we can do it again.
Thank you.
And actually, I think if we get it right, we would, sorry, it's not India Alliance. That's a BJP framing. It's India Alliance.
What's the last word stand for?
Uh,
What What does the A stand
Alliance.
for at the end? So wouldn't it be redundant to say India
No,
Alliance?
it's not. It's not. Because the whole idea of the alliance was to put across to the people of India that India is being attacked. And it was very successful. And generally the BJP people say India Alliance, but everyone else in India says India Alliance.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Hello, Mr. Gandhi. Welcome to the Hilltop over here. My name is Nikash Harpanhalli. I am from Dallas, Texas, and I'm gay and Indian American. Last October, the Indian Supreme Court refused to legalize same-sex marriage. So my question for you, as well as Congress, as well as the India Alliance, is what is the future for Congress's policy towards gender and sexual minorities on the subject of love? What might that future look like in the next 4 years as BJP government continues? And on that same subject, what is the role of Congress and other interlocutors in promoting a freer, fair, and more loving India?
No, I think I can't really comment on a Supreme Court judgment. But what I said earlier, from our perspective, what you want to do, how you want to live your life, what religion you want to follow, what you want to wear, what your sexual preferences are, is your business. It's not our business. And for us, we would defend your right and everybody else's rights to express themselves and to live in a way they think fair. As long as you're not disturbing other people, being violent, being aggressive, we tend to accept it.
Thank you. Welcome to Georgetown.
Thank you.
Just before I'm taking the next question, given the weight of questions, am I allowed to extend this to 5:10? Because we started at 4:10. Is that all right with you? So I know I'm looking beyond you, but I should ask you first. And the answer is yes.
Yeah, it's fine.
Good. Yes, sir.
Who should be the face of the whole party? Do you think you're the best leader to be able to take on Modi, or is there someone better?
I mean, our position in our alliance is that we are not going to answer that question until we won the election. And there are multiple people, very talented people in the India Alliance. So we're not, because the moment we start that discussion, right, it opens the space for the press and the BJP to create issues. So our decision is that we're not going to raise that question. We're going to fight the election, and then after the election we decide.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please.
Hi, Mr. Gandhi. I'm Nikita. I'm a third-year undergraduate student at Georgetown, and I'm originally from Bengaluru in India. My question was more so, and you touched on this with the Congress bank accounts being frozen this election, but in December of 2023, when BJP still had the supermajority, there was the highest number of opposition MPs being suspended from parliament. So obviously it's a very different electoral distribution right now. So my question is more so like, how has your ability to exercise your right to free speech changed? What have you observed? And how is the opposition able to better fulfill its constitutional duties?
Look, there are two different issues, okay? One issue is fighting and winning elections. And we're confident that we will fight and win elections against the BJP. And I think you will see it in the next 2 or 3 months that we will win those elections, okay? That's very different than undoing the damage the RSS and the BJP have done to our institutions. And that is a much deeper problem, and that's not going to get solved so easily and so simply. But we have to have a strategy for it. I still have 20 plus cases on me. I still have, in India, the law, right, is that you can only do a defamation case if you're the person who's being defamed. I have 20 of those filed by people who I am defamed, right? So there's a huge set of structures that are being used to attack the opposition, investigative agencies, legal system, and that continues. That hasn't stopped. So, but the real challenge in front of India is how do you make our institutions neutral again? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm right in thinking that lots of people who called Modi objected to what you said about Mr. Modi, right? There are different libel actions from people called Modi, or is that a misreporting?
No, I mean it's a legal case, so I'm not going to go into the details of it, but yeah, I won't go into the details of it because it'll get me into trouble.
Fair enough.
Hello, Mr. Gandhi. My name is Himank. I am a recent MBA student from UC Berkeley. I came here to see you and meet you. One, really admire your courageous attempt at bringing vulnerability into politics using words like love. That's indeed very rare. I also did a small census in my class of all the Indians who were in my classroom. Around 7 in 10 said that they would want to return back to India in a few years. This is very different from how the situation was around 10 years ago or 15 years ago in the United States. There seem to be like two factors which are sort of leading to this. One is just the state of American dream right now, and also the improving economic opportunities in India. Around 1 million students have migrated to India, to US from India since the past 5 years. I just want to know, one, what is your comment on this phenomena? And second is, what is your message to students who are not able to avail the economic opportunities because of which they came to United States?
Look, and I've said this a couple of times, if you looked at global production in the 40s, 50s, 60s, you would find that it was carried out by the United States and by the West. Okay? If you wanted to buy a car in the 60s, you'd want to buy an American car. If you wanted to buy a refrigerator, you wanted to buy an American refrigerator. And the West and India handed that over to the Chinese, right? So the reality is that the cell phones you're using, the shirts you're wearing, the shoes you're wearing, most of them are not made in the United States, they're not made in Europe, they're not made in India, they're made in China, right? So there are two activities that countries can do. One is the organizing production. The second is organizing consumption. China organizes production. The West, India, America organizes consumption. China also organizes consumption. So Uber is organizing consumption. Ola in India is organizing consumption. Foxconn is organizing production. Elon Musk organizes production. The components of his car, of course, come from China. The batteries come from China. The motors come from China. And the problem is that a large country like India simply cannot get away with not organizing production. It just won't work because you will not create the amount of jobs that you need. That's what's happening. So if you look at India, you'll find that there is an IT industry. 1% of the population, 2% of the population, 3% of the population. But if you're a young person who wants a blue-collar job, it's not available. And the only way that job is going to get available is if you start producing, right? And India has just stopped producing. You look at our top businesses, Adani, Ambani, the big guys, they don't produce anything, right? So that's the real question. Now, there's a whole set of structures that don't allow production. Our GST is anti-production. Our GST is entirely designed to incentivize consumption, right? So you have to change completely the architecture of what you're doing. Our district, we call our district, we call them district collectors, right? They should be district producers, right? We need to think about getting into the act of production, and we're not doing that. And there's a reason, because the large monopolists don't want India to produce. It's much more convenient just to sell Chinese product, right? You get a rent on it, you sell it in India, you don't have to go through the rigors of production, you don't have to deal with the labor problems, you don't have to deal with the conflicts that production requires you to deal with, and you make huge amounts of money. But it's not sustainable. And you can see social tension rising. You can see unemployment numbers rising. So that's really what India has to think about. You have, every district in India has something unique they produce. Moradabad, brass capital. Mirzapur, carpets. Bellari, jeans. Surat, diamonds, right? Now, the Indian government has forgiven 16 lakh crores in bank loans to 25 business people. How many of those people were actually producers? How many small businesses were forgiven their loans? How many medium-sized businesses were forgiven their loans? Not a single one. Even farmers, who are basically producers, their loans have not been forgiven. So my question is, why should 20 people, 25 people, get a free gift of 16 lakh crores? For what? What have they done? And if you're giving them that gift, give it to other people as well. Right? So these are the type of questions that India will have to deal with. Now, to say that India can't produce is wrong. Because I can tell you examples where India is producing. I can tell you that Tamil Nadu does quite a good job at production. I can tell you that Pune does quite a good job at production. I can tell you parts of Karnataka are pretty good at production. But the entire system is designed so that they can't succeed. Try. Go and talk to some of the guys. Go and talk to some of the guys who are trying to build automobiles and scooters in India and see what they say. The entire system is rigged against them. So that's what you have to think about. Thank you.
We've only got a few minutes left, so if the last 2 or 3 questioners could be efficient, please.
Absolutely. Namaste, Rahul Gandhi ji. My name is Apurva Ramakrishnan, and well, because in your talk you did mention caste and reservation, I'm going to throw you a hardball question. In that, I would specifically like to know your thoughts and your party's thoughts on at what point, if at all, would we move away, or would you move away from the idea of caste-based reservations being a permanent solution to the underlying grassroots issues that necessitate such reservation-based systems? At what point would we as a society, but more importantly, you and your party, look at caste as caste-based reservations as a treatment of the symptoms and not the actual problem?
Why do you say caste-based reservations are treatment of the symptoms?
Because I believe that the reservations, when they came about historically as well, were there to provide equal access to opportunity. And the issue is, even today, the access to opportunity is where the lag is there. And do you think there are better ways to strengthen our systems institutionally at the grassroots levels than the caste-based reservation?
Well, let's look at the numbers. If you look at the Indian government, and you look at, there are 70 bureaucrats who run the Indian government, secretaries to the government of India. These are the guys that take pretty much all the financial decisions in the government. Okay? If you add up Dalits, tribals, OBCs, they come to 73%. Out of 70 people, there's one tribal. I think 3 Dalits, 3 OBCs. So and I think a minority. So 90% of India, in the government of India, has access to less than 10% of the positions that determine how money is going to be spent. And when you actually look at the financial numbers, then tribals get 10 paisa out of 100 rupees. Dalits get, I think, 5 rupees out of 100 rupees. And OBCs get a similar number. So the fact of the matter is that they're not getting participation, right? And the problem is that 90% of India is not able to play, right? Go through the list of every single business leader in India. And I've done it. Show me the tribal name. Show me the Dalit name. Show me the OBC name. Out of the top 200, I think there's one OBC. They're 50% of India. So we're not treating the symptom. That's the problem, right? Now, it's not the only tool. There are other tools. But we will think of scrapping reservations when India is a fair place. And India is not a fair place. Now, that creates a problem because there are many people who come from the upper castes, right, who say, look, what have we done wrong, right? Why are we being punished? And so then you think about increasing dramatically the supply of some of these things. You think about decentralizing power. You think about involving many more people in the governance of our country, right? You think of opening up, I mean, frankly, with all due respect, I don't think any of you are ever going to become Adani or Ambani. And there's a reason for that. You can't. Because those doors are closed. So the answer to people in the general caste is you open those doors.
I think we have time for one final question, so make it count.
Hello, Mr. Gandhi. My name is Risa. I'm a third-year student at Georgetown, and I'm originally from Mumbai. My question to you is based on your comment that our institutions have been captured. I wanted to ask, what are the actual policy reforms that the INC sees in order to uncapture our institutions? You said that our education system is extremely unfair and only really prioritizes the success of the rich. So how can we change these systems to make them more meritocratic and make them service the general population of India?
I mean, the institutional capture is something that's new. And frankly, we're going to have to navigate that when we come to that point because we've never dealt with that. We've never dealt with a situation where, the RSS has filled an entire institution with its people. And so we have some thoughts about it, but we'd have to do it as and when it happens. In terms of the education system, it's just dramatically increasing access, dramatically increasing the size of the education system, putting much more money into it. The best Indian education institutions are still government institutions. IIT is not a private institution, right? IIM is not a private institution. People forget that. There's no private institution that matches the IITs. Everybody accepts that. So putting effort into designing new institutions, scaling up old institutions, and decentralizing some of these things, I think would help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So with apologies to the other questioners, I'm gonna have to end it now. But I just want to thank Mr. Gandhi. That was one of the most unusual interviews I've done. Love being cited more often than I normally expect, and it was very, very interesting to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you
so much for sparing the time. Thank you. Thank you. That was great.